I think I should probably just give up for today, but we need to finish this. Okay, we're up to the thyroid gland. We're going to do the thyroid and the parathyroid gland in this video, and that's only 3 hormones, so we've got that going for us. So we'll first look at the great blood supply that this thyroid has. Here's the thyroid, and here are the carotid arteries, and they're going up. This is a common carotids. They're going up your neck. Your thyroid's right here. It has this inner small area called the isthmus, and then the beefier parts go around the trachea. Now, if you put your hand on your throat and you swallow, the thing that goes up is this guy, it's the larynx. And what part you see of the larynx here is actually called the thyroid cartilage because it's a location superior to the thyroid. If we cut into the thyroid, it would look like this. Look at all those little balls that appear to be hollow in this picture, and I'm very glad that they're hollow because it gives you a better illustration. When we talk about the thyroid follicles, we're talking about hollow balls that aren't really hollow because they're hollow. They're full of this thing called thyroglobulin. It's a sticky protein that is like a precursor or a helper to make thyroid hormone. And so these follicles, are there each one of this is a follicle, this is a follicle, this is a cut open follicle right here. Here's another cut open follicle. The follicles are made by follicle cells, and follicle cells make T4 and T3. These are our thyroid hormones. The follicle cells make these. Collectively, T4 and T3 are called your thyroid hormones. They are the hormones of metabolism. What is metabolism? It's how fast the chemical reactions are occurring in your cells. And so the faster your metabolism, the faster the chemical reactions are occurring, and the more heat you'll actually produce. So someone who has a very fast metabolism is usually a little warmer overall than someone with a super slow metabolism body-wise. So here we have the follicle cells. Now between them, we have cells out here called parafollicular cells. And here it's showing you a little parafollicular cell here. We can just pretend like if it's not touching this stuff, which is the thyroglobulin, that all of these are parafollicular cells. They're not parafollicular, but the point is if it's not touching thyroglobulin, just pretend it's a parafollicular cell, cells between the follicles. The parafollicular cells make calcitonin. So we've got the thyroid hormones, and we have calcitonin being secreted by the thyroid. Here's some vocabulary you need to know. This thyroglobulin is a protein. You know how we make proteins on ribosomes, modify them in endoplasmic reticulum, send them to the Golgi apparatus. The Golgi apparatus sends them off, this is thyroglobulin, into this follicle. So these follicle cells, everything in yellow here you see is a follicle cell. It's making this thyroglobulin and putting it in here. And this is the inner part of the circle. Okay, so we make the protein part, and so your follicles, the round little balls are full of thyroglobulin. Next, we have to have the follicle. This definition are these round parts that make up the actual thyroid, and the walls of the follicle are made of follicle cells. Between them, between the follicles, we have cells out here called parafollicular cells, and they're the ones that are going to be producing calcitonin. Now, let's get back to these follicle cells. These follicle cells make thyroid hormone, and to make thyroid hormone, you need iodine. You need iodine in your diet to produce thyroid hormone. If you do not take in iodine in your diet at all, you will develop a goiter because it's required for you to make thyroid. And so what will happen is, imagine this little follicle is pretty small, right? Well, if we don't have the iodine, I can't move myself, I don't think, I can, I'm moving. All right. To make our actual T3 and T4, we have this guy right here. This guy right here is a tyrosine molecule. Here we go. This is our thyroglobulin, by the way. That's part of it. We're going to snip that off. You don't really send that into the blood or anything. We have tyrosine here, and we have a tyrosine molecule here. Notice this tyrosine has one iodine molecule to it, and this tyrosine has two. You're like, what? Okay, to make thyroid hormone, it's a protein-based hormone just made of 2 amino acids. Here's 1 amino acid, and say it has 2 iodine molecules attached. We would call that a DIT, diiodothyronine, or yeah. And if we have another tyrosine molecule, and that tyrosine molecule only has 1 iodine to it, we would call it a MIT, MIT, monoiodine tyrosine. So we have 1. So if we add, oh my goodness, I'm having a time here. If we add a DIT plus a MIT, look what we get. 2 tyrosines, 2 little amino acids, plus 3 iodines. This is what T3 looks like. Bam. If we take 2 DITs and add them together, a DIT plus a DIT gives you T4, because you have 4 iodine molecules. So we need this iodine in our diet to actually make the thyroid hormone, T4 and T3. So here we see iodine is being taken out of the blood because we got it from our diet. It went through the walls of the small intestines into the blood, to the thyroid it goes. These little follicle cells take the iodine in, and it's shuttled into where the thyroglobulin is, and we actually make thyroid hormone. Am I going to ask you how we make thyroid hormone? No, but the reason that it needs to be taught is that we need iodine to get the job done, right? If we can't add the iodine here and here, we are not going to make thyroid hormone. And what's going to happen is the follicles get bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger, full of thyroglobulin, but no hormone. And so you end up with a big thing called a goiter. Okay, let's keep on keeping on. So the thyroid gland, we're going to focus right now on these hormones right here. They are the hormones of metabolism. What happens if you have too much or too little? If you have too little, we call that hyposecretion. And if you have too much, we have hypersecretion. As you can imagine, if you have on this side, hold on here. On this side, we have hypothyroidism. If you don't have enough thyroid hormone, all of these are your symptoms. Just think everything slows down big time. You get constipated. You get little puffy face. You get weak. You have a lower heart rate, a colder body temperature, reduced appetite, yet weight gain, stuff like that. So would it be good to have hypothyroidism? No, it's miserable to have hypothyroidism. So would you rather have hyperthyroidism? The thyroid affects every organ system, and that's the biggest deal of all. If you have too much of the thyroid hormone, then you have the increased metabolic rate, a higher body temperature. You lose weight, but you're eating a lot. Your skin tends to be warm and flushed, and you sweat, and you have a rapid heart rate. It wears your heart out. It can really wear your heart out. Hyperthyroidism is quite dangerous. And because unlike with hypothyroidism, where you'd have constipation, you'd have diarrhea, with hyperthyroidism, it's just everything's the opposite. And this thing called exophthalmos, where your eyes protrude, the connective tissue behind the eyes starts to proliferate, and it pushes the eyes out. And so you have a very distinctive look. So anyway, these are the differences between hyper and hypothyroidism. So look at what people look like. Here's that exophthalmos, where the eyes are bulgy, where the eyes bulge out of the face. You can look that word up and look at all different types of eyes sticking out of heads. That most likely is indicative of a thyroid disorder. Specifically, in the case of hyperthyroidism, you can have hyperthyroidism from taking too much thyroid medication. You certainly can. But in this case, if you have exophthalmos, most likely you have Graves' disease. Graves' disease, which is autoimmune. What does that mean? That means that your body is attacking itself in some way. The interesting thing about Graves' disease is we know the hypothalamus controls the pituitary, and the pituitary controls the thyroid. So we release thyrotropin releasing hormone from the hypothalamus to the pituitary. That causes the pituitary to release thyroid stimulating hormone, and that causes the thyroid to release thyroid hormone. Well, and then the thyroid hormone goes back and feeds back negatively if we have enough thyroid hormone and cuts this system off. Well, someone with Graves' disease, what's happening there, I'm going to move myself again. If you'll ever see me looking off to the corner, it's because the way I have to record this thing. But if you ever see anybody with exophthalmos, just assume that this is going on. They are producing too much thyroid hormone and it's not shutting the system off. Why? Why wouldn't it shut the system off? Well, to be honest with you, it's shutting this TSH down and it's shutting this down. But someone with, because I said it's an autoimmune disease, someone with Graves' disease, they have these little antibodies that are floating around in their blood that look or mimic TSH. So someone with Graves' disease could have very low TSH, very suppressed TSH, but high levels of thyroid hormone. Well, that's what you'd actually expect. And it just, the system's doesn't shut off. Now, in this person up here, this is a goiter, an endemic goiter. Usually this is caused by not enough intake of iodine, because in this case, the hypothalamus is releasing thyrotropin releasing hormone. And then here was the pituitary that causes it to release thyroid stimulating hormone. And we can't produce thyroid hormone. We can't because we don't have any iodine. And so we get higher and higher and higher levels of TSH, and it's telling the thyroid, do your job, make more thyroid hormone, but the thyroid can't because it doesn't have the ingredients. So it pumps out more and more thyroglobulin, and those individual follicles, which may start out like this, end up being really big. And so it wraps around your neck. And that's what a goiter looks like. So this is one disorder, goiter. Here's another, hyperthyroidism, aka Graves' disease. Now, if you have hypothyroidism, it can be of a variety of ways, but also most hypothyroidism is a autoimmune disease called Hashimoto's. Hashimoto's. When people say they have Hashimoto's, they have hypothyroidism. And someone with Hashimoto's, they just have all the symptoms of hypothyroidism and they take thyroid hormone replacement. However, if they don't, this is how we end up looking. Now, see this woman right here? Look at her right here. See how puffy she is? And I mean, just look at her hands, everything, she's swollen, etc. This is called myxedema. Myxedema. Myxedema is uncontrolled hypothyroidism. It's not something that you want. It's literally translates into pus swelling, but you get all of the symptoms of hypothyroidism amplified, and it really shows everywhere on your body. Now, myxedema affects adults. Untreated hypothyroidism results in myxedema. If it's in a child, because when you're pregnant, you need to go to get maternal care because they always check your thyroid and everything else. This next disorder could be caused by low thyroid in the mother. And I couldn't really actually tell you if it's also low thyroid hormone in the child, but this is called cretinism. And the child is born with a protruding tongue and a thick neck. The umbilicus, there's usually a herniation. The child does not, because thyroid hormone is so incredibly important in the development of the nervous system and everything else, then the child is mentally delayed and never recovers. And so cretinism is not something that you want. And that's why it's really important to go to the doctor when you are pregnant, one of the reasons. Okay, so those are some of your thyroid disorders. When it comes to calcitonin, I'm telling you this because pretend like this is a shot of calcitonin that you can give somebody if they end up with too much calcium in their blood. The calcitonin is made by the parafollicular cells, and it's released by the thyroid when calcium levels are greatly elevated. However, and what it's going to do is it's going to inhibit the osteoclast. It's going to say, don't break down any more bone, because then you're going to increase blood calcium levels. It just stimulates the osteoblasts to take calcium out of the blood and put it into, it stimulates osteoblasts to build more bone. And if you take calcium out of the blood and put it into the bone, well, that's a fantastic thing. This is a direct antagonist to the next hormone that we're going to do, which is PTH, which handles if blood calcium levels are dropping. Calcitonin is if blood calcium levels are going up. So let's just do this. Blood calcium levels increase. The thyroid detects. I do a better video at the end of this unit for this question, but blood calcium levels increase. The thyroid detects and releases calcitonin, and it tones down calcitonin, and it tones down calcium levels. And how it does it is calcitonin targets the osteoblast. Calcitonin. I'm never going to pretend like I wrote calcitonin. Stimulates osteoblast, and then they take the calcium out of the blood and put it into the bone, so blood calcium levels drop like that. It's a negative feedback system. It's not very effective in adults. However, there are times when you get hypercalcemia. You don't want hypercalcemia, and you don't want hypocalcemia. But there are certain disorders like hyperparathyroidism or certain malignant cancers that can increase your blood calcium levels. Well, if you have really high blood calcium levels, what's going to happen is you release the excess calcium in your feces or in your urine or whatever, but it starts to build up in the soft tissues in your body. Calcium does if you have too much calcium. So it can build up in the soft tissues of your body, and we don't want that to happen. So, and it also depresses the nervous system. So these are the two. Now, in this case, if you have hypercalcemia, don't assume that your thyroid gland is going to rescue you by releasing calcitonin. That's just not going to work, but there are therapies, calcitonin-like therapies that reduce your blood calcium levels. I said that was due to hyperparathyroidism, which we're about to do the parathyroid next, or malignant. That means cancer that's spread. Malignant tumors sometimes cause too much calcium, too much blood calcium. So, like I said, if you have high blood calcium levels, don't assume that your thyroid's not working. Okay, the parathyroid glands. Here we have the back of here's the thyroid. Here's the trachea. We can see the trachea from the front. The esophagus is behind the trachea. And look how this thyroid wraps around, right? And now we have these parathyroid glands. Now, they can be more than on the back of the thyroid. Near the thyroid. But these parathyroid glands are not thyroid glands, right? They're not thyroid glands. They are totally different glands altogether. I hope I'm recording here. They're totally different glands altogether, and they release parathyroid hormone. They are the single most, your parathyroid glands are the most important regulators of blood calcium level. And we need our blood calcium to be within a certain range and a homeostatic range for proper functioning of the nervous system, proper functioning of the muscular system, and to help us with blood clotting. So we don't ever want our blood calcium levels to get too low. Well, we store calcium in our bones. And so these parathyroid glands will release parathyroid hormone. If calcium levels drop, the parathyroid glands release parathyroid hormone, and they target these three things: the bones, the kidneys, and the small intestines. When parathyroid targets the bones, it's going to tell the osteoclast to break down the bone to release calcium into the blood. That will increase blood calcium levels. So this alone increases blood calcium levels. It targets the kidneys. Let's do the small intestines first. It targets the small intestines to say absorb more calcium from the food. Every time we eat, we have the ability to let calcium go right through our digestive system and out the other end. Or we can harvest it if we need it to maintain those blood calcium levels. So PTH, if it's released, will tell the small intestines, take as much calcium from the food as you can. Take it, put it into the blood. And we cannot absorb calcium without vitamin D. These two guys are friends. We can, you notice like on milk jugs, they'll say fortified with vitamin D. Or if you take calcium supplements, it'll always have vitamin D in there because we need vitamin D to absorb calcium. And so what do the kidneys have to do with this? You make vitamin D in the inactive form in the skin from cholesterol, and then that inactive vitamin D goes through the body, and when it gets to the kidneys will activate it. I believe it's called calciferol to calcitriol. I cannot remember, to be honest with you, at this very moment, but it activates vitamin D. And if we activate vitamin D, then we can absorb more calcium. So all in all, the blood calcium levels were dropping, and the body took steps to make them go up. Here, thyroid, by the way, all of this in this direction, these are thyroid follicles. Notice they're purple just because there's a different stain. Back here, when we saw the thyroid, it was a pink stain. See the thyroid? Well, it's kind of purple and pink. They're the follicles, and here we see them in a different view. These are thyroid follicles going up this way, and this is all parathyroid gland down here. And the parathyroid gland, what hormone does it make? Parathyroid hormone. Now I go over the calcitonin and parathyroid hormone again at the end of this chapter, and I might be a little more patient with it, so you'll want to check out that video. And I believe that is it until we get to the adrenal glands. The adrenal glands, I need a good night's sleep before I start talking about adrenal glands. For real, for real.